Before we get into things, I'll just make a quick spoiler warning for the movie. I'm going to go over a lot of points that happen in the film and things that I'm interested in and want to discuss and maybe critique a little bit, but we'll see how that goes. Just a little heads up. If you haven't seen the film, go watch it. It's great. I enjoyed it a lot. I watched it with my flatmates. It was interesting to say the least. So I guess let's get into it. So the premise of the film is that we have this character named Connie, played by Robert Pattinson, who happens to be a bank robber for some odd reason we don't really know, who is attempting to free his developmentally disabled brother Nick, played by Ben Safdie, one of the Safdie Brothers who directed the film, from police custody after he ends up in hospital due to one of the bank robberies going AWOL. Personally, I fucking love this movie. While the pacing is a bit off, it has this aura about it where with every scene it just gets crazier and crazier, to the point that at every stage where an event occurs, me and my mates were like, what? Like, you know, it's one of those movies where it gets crazier and crazier to the point that you have no idea where the fuck this is going at all. Highly recommend it to watch it with people, especially if you're intoxicated. Sadly, I was not, but I think it'd be super funny and a great experience if you were to be intoxicated and watch this film with friends. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, why does Connie need his brother at the robbery in the beginning of the film? Why? There is no reason for him to be there, you know? He doesn't do anything. He just stands there being menacing, and I think it's for the story, and I completely understand why they put them in, because he is the catalyst to why these events happen and why Connie gets all this trouble and whatever, you know. But still, realistically, it's kind of stupid, right? Because it's not like he's carrying more money. It's just one bag of cash that Connie could easily carry himself, and it seems that the cashier or the worker at the bank was willing to give it no matter what, if Nick was there, if he wasn't there. So that's a bit of a problem I had in the beginning. So we get past the robbery scene, all this happens, then Nick gets caught, goes to jail, and like the absolute AWOL shit just starts from there. I mean, to begin with, Connie gets the wrong dude out of the hospital. Like, what? I think that point when we find out that Connie's pretty much kidnapped the wrong person really flipped the switch, because at one point one of my mates was pretty much questioning the point of the movie. Because in the beginning, when he took his brother out of the hospital, we thought it was Nick, right? So what's the point of the movie? We kidnapped Nick, we have the money, theoretically. We could probably get it back or steal it from the guy we gave it to for the Bond releasage. But yeah, that's it. But then the whole fucking script flips when we find out that it's Ray and it's not Nick, and that Nick is still back in the hospital, and now that this Ray dude, I believe that's his name, Ray, he's just like this other inmate that, you know, has his own little story that just goes AWOL and ends up being in the hospital and happens to be also physically messed up to the point that you can't recognize him and all the covering that he was put in at the hospital. Okay, we can find all of that out, that's fun, whatever. But also, the whole relationship between Connie and the girl, what's the point in that? I don't understand why she's even in the story other than for a whoa reaction. Because we find out that she's 16, underage. We don't know how old Connie is, but he's probably in his 20s, late 20s, maybe mid 20s, a lot older than the girl. So I don't really understand why she's there. I mean, it is a quick scapegoat into getting the vehicle and then going to the hospital and everything that happens at the fair. We'll get into that in a second, but they could have easily just stolen a car. I don't think they had to put that in, especially the kissing scene. Me and the boys were extremely disturbed by that scene. I don't know how Robert Pattinson signed off for that. Personally, I haven't researched it, and I don't know the age of the actress that played the kid. But like, yeah, that bit was a bit weird, and I don't know how I feel about that. But then we get to the fair scene and the whole security drama, and what's crazy to me isn't the fact that Connie got away with that, you know? It's not the fact that he got away with impersonating the security guard in front of the cops and then knowing where the switches are to all the lights when they're asking to turn on the lights. That made no sense to me, but whatever. What's crazy to me is the fact that they like pretty much killed the dude, right? The security guy. I did some research and I found a really interesting Reddit thread that talks about the effects that LSD have, especially in such large doses, and I'll leave a link in the description. But it is actually insane what they did to the guy. So if you haven't seen the movie, what ends up happening is that they go to a fair where there's supposedly a large amount of cash and drugs, expensive drugs, that was stashed there by Ray in order to get it back because they were found the police and all this drama, whatever. Connie, Ray, and the girl go to the fair. They try and find all the cash and the drugs in order to get some money, get their lives back together, start going, and then help Connie get Nick out of the hospital. I suppose, I don't know how they did this. I did some research that Ray somehow got a whole bottle of Sprite that was filled with acid. And that was their main goal, because supposedly that's worth over $15,000 or however much it's worth. I'm not too sure. They don't really give specifics. I mean, realistically, if that was pure acid, that would be extremely expensive, but it's probably diluted and this, that, and the third. However, let's say it is pure acid, not diluted, just pure acid, an entire 350 milliliter bottle of Sprite just with acid. What ends up happening is that the security guard at the fair finds them. He confronts them about entering the property and rummaging through everything, and Connie ends up beating the living hell out of him, like to the point of, I personally thought he was dead. I mean, he looked dead, but we find out later that he's only knocked out. And then they have this brilliant idea that in order to ensure that when he does wake up and does regain consciousness, that he doesn't recognize them. So what do? They take this fucking 350 liter bottle of acid and just pour it on his face, into his mouth. I don't know how much was in there. I'd expect it to be at least a third of the bottle went on him. And in this Reddit thread that I mentioned just before, it talks about how it is possible to ingest acid through many different ways. You can ingest it orally, which is what happened, but then it can also be absorbed by your eyes, your nostrils, and your skin as well. So it's not like the amount that was poured out went to waste. He probably ingested or absorbed all of the amount that was poured onto him. To put this into perspective, it's just to understand how crazy this is and what effect it actually have on the dude. Because for me, this is, when I finished the movie, this is what I was thinking about for the rest of the time. Like, yeah, the whole kissing scene with the underage girl, yeah, that's fucked up, but like, I was more interested in this. Like, how would this affect the guy? It's legit so much acid, like so much acid. Like, I don't, how does that, what's gonna happen to him? Because we see near the end of the movie when the cops think he's just some drug addict because he happens to be Somalian, all this racial stereotyping, on a ton of drugs, because Kanye took his uniform off and put it on himself. He's talking gibberish, he doesn't know what's happening. And in this Reddit post, it talks about how one tab of acid is usually 100 UG, which is enough to get hallucinations. Although I wouldn't know myself, I've never done it. One tab of acid, that's enough to give you tripping. I'll have a decent trip. However, there have been cases, well, documented cases of people taking 1,000 UGs of acid, right? Which is, it was usually around a thumbprint of acid, so 1,000 UGs. They say, well, people have done this, that have documented this, that the experience is indescribable, that they compare it to what they believe death would feel like, that the come up is almost instant instead of being usually the amount. I believe it takes about an hour for acid to kick in if you take a controlled dosage, but if you take a large dosage, it's almost instant, and it intensifies at an exponential rapid rate, usually lasting about 12 to 15 hours. But if you take what this guy who wrote the post believes, that if you take the amount that the security guard took, it would probably last 24 to 48 hours total, and it would be at like a peak of 24 to 48 hours, with the chances of you never being able to fully come down and be back to normal. So if we were to say that the acid was not diluted, that the majority that we saw go into his face was absorbed, this dude would most definitely have severe HPPD, which is hallucinogenic persisting perception disorder, for the rest of his life. It's essentially having permanent visual hallucinations for the rest of your life, because the acid is embedded in you. But I know he's going to be just destroyed for the rest of his life. We don't know exactly how much it was, but we'd speculate that it was about 500 hits of acid in about the span of 3 seconds that this dude consumed. That's if we're optimistically speaking, of course. As it says in the post, they depicted his reaction pretty spot on. The fact that this guy is Somalian, at least the actor, so we'd suspect that the character is also Somalian. His brain goes back to speaking his native language, but he can't because he's just so out of it that just starts talking gibberish. And I mean, realistically, LSD or acid can't outright kill you, depending on your body chemistry. A dose like this could easily cause seizures and permanent psychological damage, which is quite interesting to look at, but still I don't know why they did this, or at least this much. They could have given him a small dose or whatever. Personally, I think that Ray and Connie were insanely cruel. Like they really fucked this guy's life up, like they really did. And I think me and the majority of people that have seen the movie cringe at that point in the film because it's just so ridiculous. Like there's no reason for it. And I think in a sense that's what makes the film good, because the things that happen are so insane that it can't be real. But as you may know, there's a lot of things and stories in life that seem so surreal that actually did happen. So maybe, I'm not too sure. So overall, Connie's like fucked up. He's not a good person. I was trying to figure out throughout the film what the Safdie brothers were trying to do, if they were trying to make him look good, look bad, or whatever. But all in all, he's not a good dude, especially after he didn't recognize the girl that helped him, or that he made out with, when the cops confronted her outside of the fair. At the end of the film's interesting. I'd really recommend it if you haven't seen it already. If you have seen it, I mean, did you like it? What do you think? Do you think that what Connie did was right, wrong? Let me know.